And welcome to Nancy's Neighborhood, folks, and it's good to have you all with us again today. The last show we had some really good guests, and this show we have some really good guests. And the first guest is going to know a whole lot more about what he's going to talk about than I'm going to know what he's going to talk about. But I think it's exciting. And I may have to get Bryce off the computer and over here in a few minutes to interpret some of these things. But anyway, I have Dr. Luis Almeida.
Yes.
And he is going to be joining the faculty at Lee University pretty soon. And he also wants to talk to us about communication skills and robotics and take it.
Automation and
Okay.
some of the impacts that it can have on society.
Yes, go with that because it is going to have effects on society.
Absolutely. What we're seeing in American society today, Nancy, what's happening, we're seeing the advancement of what we call a technopoly. There is so much technology that we're seeing in our society today that some of our functions, some of our systems, they're becoming way too automated. And the implications of that are quite significant, especially in a town here like in Cleveland, where we have so much retail, so many retail jobs, and now some of those discussions that Amazon is having that different kinds of chains in fast food are talking about of ways to automate the workforce and reduce cost for their operation, but the impacts in a town like ours can be quite significant. So, which I still am a little new here in Cleveland, but I can have an idea that maybe taking some of those jobs away from retail in Cleveland can have a significant impact in our local economy.
You are so right. But the one thing that I find, I have a little gift shop.
Yes.
I'm a retailer. And I find that a lot of people come into my shop because of the personal one-on-one. And so when you automate, you lose that. And even if I go into McDonald's and it's automated, I'm still losing that one-on-one. I can't fuss at the person that doesn't put the pickle on my hamburger, okay? So how do we get by that?
Well, right. This is exactly why, Nancy, that we talk about what we call Escape the Machine,
Okay.
which is a movement that asks folks to be a little more self-critical about how we communicate, how we actually interact with the technology that we have on a daily basis. And that movement right there calls for a better development of communication skills, what we call interpersonal skills. So be able to go out and actually have a conversation with folks, maybe escape the machine and go to church.
And this is amazing because I've done a little bit of things of like interviewing students for jobs. And by the way, I like your T-shirt.
Oh, thank you.
And they don't make eye contact. They don't know how to carry on a conversation. It's scary.
It's very scary. And in fact, what we call mediated communication, when we're trying to text and talk over the internet. But the social skills that, Nancy, you pointed out very well, very eloquently, is that when we are in retail and when it's in the world of business, it's so critical that we have those social skills that allow us to be able to connect with the customer, to be able to navigate through society. And I'm very concerned about that because I'm seeing a lack of interpersonal skills within the new generation, which as a college professor, it's almost like a red light, right? So,
absolutely.
And I say, well, we need to talk a little more in public and in a public domain about this, and that yeah, I'm glad they pointed out.
Well, I think I have been out to eat before at restaurants where there's a family,
Yes.
mother, dad, 2 kids sitting there. They are not conversing. They each one have their phone, and they're going like this. And I'm thinking, my mother would have smacked that phone right out of my hand and said, young lady, we're here to talk a little bit, interact a little bit. But we don't do that anymore.
Not as much because, and I can explain that through what we call the rumor robot cycle. And the more that we interact with those computerized devices, well, my cell phone is not here with me, which is a good thing.
That's right. Mine's not here with me either. That's right.
But the more that we interact with those devices, then what tends to happen is that we pass through a process of transformation. So if we look at the human being as being in a state of equilibrium, the first stage of that, you go through a process of transformation into what I call the second phase, which would be the the obsessed phase of that model. That then after that you go to something that I call the human robot syndrome, which end up becoming the precursor to the third phase, which is the burnout phase, and then you have what we call human reversal back to the post-burnout phase, going back to equilibrium just right after the cycle. And the more that it's this cycle here, just maybe I should have pointed out. Which
Yes, and you were kind enough to run me out one with large print that I can. Yes, and that's great.
Yes, indeed, ma'am. And then what happens then is that the more that we interact with those devices, we go through that cycle going from the state of equilibrium to the obsessed phase, going to the burnout phase. So the more that we use those devices, like the iPads and the smartphones and video games, is actually part of that, which is really not a new phenomenon, but it's also part of this. And then we see a little bit of that, the kids, especially the kids, being always on a computer, constantly texting, as you pointed out, when folks are going out to eat, and folks are texting.
The whole family, mom and daddy and the kids.
Exactly, but this is how the computer behaves, and we start observing some of those behaviors, because whenever we send a command to the computer immediately sends something back to us. So let me ask you a question. When somebody sends you a text, what happens if you don't reply that text to your friend?
On my phone,
Yes.
it'll beep a couple of times, and finally I just think I've got to respond, or this thing's going to keep going beep, beep. And maybe I don't want to respond right then.
Exactly, precisely. And if, let's say that you do not respond that to your friends, what would your friends tell you?
Oh, my friends would think I was either stuck up or doing something I probably shouldn't be doing, or did I turn my phone off?
Exactly. So folks expect that we reply the messages no matter what, right?
Immediately.
Exactly. The immediacy is part of this phenomenon, Nancy. But this is how the computer behaves. Because when we send a command to a computer, the computer immediately sends a command back. Some of us were a little on the older side, not as young, you know. There was a system in the past called DOS. I don't know if you remember. It's called DOS.
I do remember DOS, yes.
So it was like command-based, right?
Yes, I was teaching school when DOS, yeah.
So when we used to give a command in DOS to the computer would send a reply back, like dear / star, you know, all those cool things, right? Now with the graphic user interface that we see in both OS and with Windows, we don't see all those things in the background, but still it's how computers operate. So when we send a command to the computer sends a message back to us. So maybe what's happening in our society and having some significant impacts in how we operate as an economically, politically, educationally, is that folks are starting to use some of those what we call computer behaviors in our daily lives. So when we send a text message to someone and they didn't reply, well, why didn't they reply? Or maybe because I don't want to reply.
I don't want to fool with you right now. I've got something else I want to do. Yes.
But there is that expectation that we would do that, but this is how a computer behaves. So it's one of the characteristics of computerized behavior.
And one of the things, too, as a former teacher, then it bothers me that now a lot of our students, kids, Bryce, are you guilty of this? They have their own little texting language.
Yes.
And if you ask them to spell out a word now, they can't, but they can give you the abbreviation that goes when they're texting.
And this is one of the side effects of technology that is being well recorded, which is the way of how we are playing with semiotics, different symbols, and putting them combined in the way that technology, or modern technology, especially through smartphone technology, is reshaping us in ways that are impacting still part of verbal communication, right? How we are constructing our sentences and things like that, which I've been also on that area of research and teaching, say, hey, folks, because this type of language is not going to get you hired.
No, it's not.
So,
and that's not what anybody wants to see on a resume either.
Exactly. But then when we talk about technology, Nancy, very often what we see is that only a few of us are really being a little more on the critical side of the other side of technology. I love technology. I'm a media professor, communications professor. But not too many folks actually talk about the other side of what innovation brings to society. And I took that road pretty seriously because back in 2011, I got very sick. Back then, I was actually working at a public university in Pennsylvania. Oh man, I wrote 2 books in a year. I was waking up around 6 o'clock in the morning, going to bed around midnight, non-stop. Of course, your productivity is all that, which, by the way, is one of the side effects of computing in technology and society, become more productive. By the way, we work today more than the Japanese. Did you know that?
No.
We do.
Well, that's kind of positive, isn't it, that we work more than the Japanese? But
To a degree.
Uh-huh.
But then, I published an article on this. I know a little bit about that
good.
too. Because then I say, well, if you're working a little more, you become more productive. Well, yes and no. You become more productive from the sense of hourly work, perhaps, but then productivity without, I guess, the bottom line of putting the money in the pocket of the company. If you get sick more often, are you really doing maybe the best? You see where we're going with that?
I do.
So we have to look at ways to be very productive. I mean, we are Americans, and we like to produce things. We like to be in the forefront of innovation. This is wonderful. But where is the tipping point that is going to make us regress rather than progress? And that's where technomotivation, through Escape the Machine, that's a movement that talks a little bit about that. You know.
This is super. I mean, I have felt for a long time very strongly about this because I'm a people person.
Yeah, me too.
And I want you, if we're having a conversation like you and I are right now, we're making eye contact, we're talking.
Yes.
And if you tied my hands behind my back, I could not talk, I'm sorry. But you know, I think we're losing that.
Very much so. And then why are we allowing that to happen? Right? If technology makes us live a better life, we use the better life. Right? We use the technology for having a better life. But what happens when we start using technology and we're living? You see where we're going with that?
You're leaving real life behind by doing that.
So
I don't want to give up my microwave, okay? But
I don't want to give up medicine like antibiotic. That's wonderful.
That's
I love
right. That's
aspirin when
right.
I have a headache. But then when it comes to a point where technology is making us tired and when we go to sleep at 1 in the morning, when a kid comes to school and cannot perform well on a test because there is too much what we call information overload, constantly texting, or when we're trying to go to a classroom, for example, as a teacher, both you and I are teachers, you know, in education, with that experience, and then the kids go to the classroom and are constantly on the cell phone, going to Twitter. So then rather than paying attention to the professor, the teacher,
That's right.
they pay attention to what's happening. So I'm critical about that.
And I'm right with you on that. And it's so great to talk to you today. Now, you will start your classes at Lee when?
That's going to be, I was called to be there in the first week of August,
Okay.
so in a few weeks.
Fall
I'm
semester.
looking
Oh, yes,
forward to
Dolly
it.
School does start in a few weeks, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so what are you going to be teaching?
This semester, we're going to be teaching a class in research methods, which I'm very excited about. I'm also teaching a class in, of course, in intercultural communications. I was born in a different country. Still, I'm American.
I know.
But I was born in a different country.
And I'm not having a bit of trouble understanding you. You're doing great. So.
Oh, thank you. And the other class that I'm teaching is going to be a class in integrated marketing communications that talks a little bit about what we're talking here in terms of
Okay.
branding and being able to help kids to sell and be able to understand the world of marketing.
That is super. I want you to come back on with me because Bryce is over there frantically saying, we have done 15 minutes, and he's looking at me. He does that. And I just hate for him to pay. But I do want you to come back on with me so we can talk some more about this and delve some more into this because I'm like you. I'm very concerned about this because we're losing communication skills.
It's a big problem, Nancy. It's a very big problem that in our society, in a technopoly, we're not addressing that very often. We often
Right.
talk about some of the side effects that we're seeing in our society, but we don't explain why is this all happening. And here's why.
And it's really pretty simple if we sit back and look at it.
Exactly.
But anyway, Luis, thank you so much for being on with me today. And
Thank you.
honestly, I want you to come back on because we need to delve into this a little bit more because 15 minutes doesn't hardly give us enough time to get into the integral parts of this. So I'll get back with you and we'll do this again. Folks, don't go away. We're going to take a little commercial break. And like I always say, watch our commercials and support our sponsors because they pay our bills. And we'll be right back with some more guests, folks. So don't go away.